Mr. Duncan Coates, the narrator, Mr. Duncan, and of course Mr. Callum Coates. And our musical maestro this evening, who will be adding the cream in your coffee, is Madam Sophie Loyer.
By George and narrated by Victor Hargraves. There now follows on the Heron Feathers, Tea with a Drop of Acid by Marc Glandening.
Adam's Introduction to Social Etiquette, Chapter 6. Partaking of tea. Always serve tea with a matching porcelain tea service. Make sure the pot has been suitably warmed and left to stand for 2 minutes before the introduction of tea and boiling water. Hold the cup lightly, using the thumb and index finger. Slowly stir, no more than 4 times, making sure not to scrape the spoon against the side or the bottom of the cup, and avoiding at all costs spillage. Sip delicately, being especially careful to avoid the making of unseemly slurping sounds.
Mr. Haigh not only consumed large quantities of tea, he took a close interest in the theory, its presentation and consumption. This was, you might say, a professional interest, but it was usually over pots of tea that John George Haigh would hope to establish good and trusting terms with what he called his
business prospects.
The consuming of tea was an important part of his craft because of the social class of the people he was hoping to enter into a relationship, be it of a necessarily temporary duration, with. Mr. Haigh, having been brought up in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, by austere Plymouth brethren, lower middle class parents, had decided that, given his chosen line of work, he needed to
refine
himself. Appearance was also of tremendous importance in the campaign of self-improvement, and in addition to his fine collection of several rose suits, silk ties, cashmere scarves, and aqua-sweeping coats, Mr. Haigh was particularly proud of other aspects of his attire. There was his pencil moustache, as worn by the matinee idol Ronald Kilmer, to whom it had been favourably compared on many occasions. Mr. Haigh would spend inordinate amounts of time trimming it to ensure that it was exactly equal on both sides. Sometimes he would even attempt to cut the number of individual hairs to try and ensure exact symmetry. Similar attention was devoted to the condition of his eyebrows, and he had yet to resolve, despite long sessions practicing in the mirror, whether the slight cocking of the left or the right made him even more fetching. Then there were his sparkling shoes, polished with a tremendous intensity each evening and morning, and his beautifully manicured hair. Few things gave him more pleasure than the compliments of women about the immaculate state of his nails.
It was inevitably over tea that John George Haigh made the acquaintance of Mrs. Henrietta Helen Olivia Robards Deacon in February 1949. Both were permanent fixtures at the Onslow Court Hotel in Queen's Gate, South Kensington. In those austere post-war tourist-free times, it was possible to live even in London's better hotels, relatively cheaply. Initially, their relationship had been restricted to the exchange of courteous smiles and slight bows of the head when they had passed each other in the hotel's common areas. Unbeknown to Mrs. Deacon, he had been making discreet and concealed inquiries about this business prospect with the hotel's resident gossip, Dorothy Butterworth. The gathering of information was what Mr. Haigh would refer to as
Stage 1. The process.
In exchange for the indispensable insights offered up by Dorothy, he would engage in the light pseudo-flirtation he had perfected and that she craved. He would reassure the gossip that her indiscretions would remain
our little secret.
Mr. Haigh was delighted to learn not only was Mrs. Deacon a rich widow, but equally important for his purposes of a kind, trusting nature, and best of all, lonely. An excellent prospect. So, with all the concentrated focus of an Egyptian cobra in London Zoo, hanging on a blissfully oblivious rodent that had been thoughtfully placed in its enclosure, Mr. Haigh glided into the hotel's calm port at 4 p.m. on the 17th of February, accompanied to the tune of Good Night, Irene, by the hotel. Having learnt that his prey never missed tea, and that day she had arranged to take it with Dorothy, he was ostentatiously brandishing a copy of Punch. As he assumed this was the sort of publication that would send out a reassuring signal about himself to someone of Mrs. Deacon's class and generation.
It's so very clever, isn't it? About Punch. Terribly amusing, I think.
Well, it's not only amusing, but highly informative, too.
After they had been formally introduced by the go-between, Mr. Haigh offered the equally controversial opinion that
a properly served tea really is the most glorious meal of the day. Better even than a fully cooked breakfast, in my humble opinion. You know, if I miss tea, I feel the day has been some way lacking. A disappointment.
I do so agree with you, Mr.
Oh, John. Please, call me John.
John. And you must call me Olivia.
The honour is mine. Anyway, as I was saying, if the standards of the establishment concerned are in some way deficient, it totally undermines the quality of the whole experience. You know, only the other day, Olivia, I found myself, because of pressure of time, you understand, at a Lion's Corner house. Not my first port of call, I can assure you. And do you know that when the waitress came over, she didn't first wipe the surface clean before taking my order? There were crumbs and other detritus. I said, "Aren't you going to do something about that, young lady?" Pointing at whatever needed removing. And the surly so-and-so gave me a look that could kill before she came back with a cloth. And you know, the pot, when it finally arrived, hadn't even been warmed.
Oh, how simply ghastly for you.
You'll be pleased to know that there was no tip for that high-minded madam. You see, speaking as a man with a scientific background, an engineer by training, I believe that if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. Or not at all. Decay, the moral slippage we're experiencing in the general level of our society starts at the bottom, with the little things, the details.
Olivia and Dorothy nodded approvingly. Having skillfully introduced the subject of his business background, Mrs. Deacon asked Mr. Haigh
What exactly?
He did. He explained that he had set up his own
highly successful operation from a laboratory in Crawley.
He was an inventor of new products. He was always looking to develop good ideas. She was challenged to come up with something he could explore the possibilities of with his tea. Eventually, after some flirtatious prompting on his part, she hesitantly offered up the idea of
Plastic fingernails?
she had been given a box of these by a friend following a visit to America. Mr. Haigh had, of course, already been made aware of Mrs. Deacon's enthusiasm for this innovation. He was told that they were now
Heartless.
and must.
Strike before plastic fingernails are exported to Britain. You must accompany me to Crawley tomorrow, so that work can commence immediately.
The Cobra was now in striking distance. Preempting the business prospects, surprise and disappointment of being led into a run-down courtyard of lock-off garages is with bits of slack. Not quite the gleaming scientific facility she had been led to expect. On unlocking the padlock, Mr. Haigh offered the word,
Well, it may not look much, but it's what goes on inside that counts. Never judge a book by its cover.
kindly, Mrs. Deacon obligingly agreed.
Oh yes, quite.
As she was ushered in past several large metal containers, stenciled with the words sulfuric acid. Then he invited his guest to hand over her handbag and remove her perfume.
Well, we wouldn't want any of the industrial appliances we use here to ruin them now, would we?
He said helpfully. The items were carefully placed on a chair. Mrs. Deacon then inquired,
Where are the other members of the team?
They're working away today, off premises, as we in the industry put it, on an important contract for the Ministry of Defence. Very hush-hush.
Mr. Haigh drew up very close alongside his new apartment and invited her to examine a piece of electronic circuitry lying on the workstation. As she struggled to put her glasses on to examine it, in the blink of an eye, he had moved directly and decisively behind her.
Half an hour or so later, Mr. Haigh ventured outside his workshop and basked for a few seconds in the cool breeze that was blowing on his face, which had been made sweaty and uncomfortable by the wearing of a gas mask this stage of the process had necessitated. He clasped his hands firmly together and then advanced to the mock-Tudor George Hotel that lay close to Giles Yard. He was greeted by the large, jovial, ruddy-cheeked mine host behind the bar, with whom he would usually share a few thoughts concerning public affairs before going into the restaurant area. This afternoon, the subject was the speedy development of Crawley that had been designated a new town 2 years before. The influx of Eastenders was a particular concern.
We get some from coming in now. You won't believe the language they use this way. Extremely uncouth, very rude talk, even in front of ladies. I've lost some of my regulars as a result.
Some people really do beg a bit of belief. They really do know moral values, you see. It must be all especially distressing for female members of staff.
I won't allow the wife to serve of an evening. I send her upstairs. I dare say Mabel over there, one of our waitresses, what we've been from London herself, has heard that kind of talk before, and worse, I dare say, in her case. But I won't be having a wife listening to that sort of talk. Crawley's burned right downhill. Thinking of moving we are, it's getting so bad.
Well, it's very sad. Very sad. Where will it all end?
Mabel brought Mr. Haigh his customary pot of tea.
Warmed, yes, I remember.
And his 2 poached eggs on toast.
Not runny nor overdone, but just firm as you like 'em. See, I know all your funny little ways, Mr. Haigh.
Mr. Haigh. Mr. Haigh thought this a little too familiar for a mere waitress. He let it pass for expediency's sake, with the pretense of a brief smile. Mr. Haigh looked at his watch. It was now nearly 3 p.m. He must return by 4 o'clock, as otherwise...
The contents of the drum will start to spill over, and that would never do.
He prided himself on the efficiency
of the efficiency and ingeniousness of the stage of the process. Probably utterly unique to myself.
Yes, he really was an inventor. He had begun to develop this method as a 12-year-old boy, nearly 30 years previously. He had started experimenting with mice in a tin in his father's garden shed. Mrs. Deacon would be the 6th business prospect he had dissolved his relationship with in this way. A new pleasing symmetry came into his mind.
Child, mice, tin.
Now followed by
Adult, business prospect, drum.
he was always searching out parallels, analogies, symmetries. They helped give order, shape to the world, and this he liked very much. John George Haigh also loved this stage.
The stage 4, to be precise.
Or the process, all stages being meticulously written down neatly in treasured notebook. It was the closest he came to an aesthetic experience, and he loved to relive in his mind.
The pumping of the acid into the large drum, the lifting of the deceased business prospect over the side, my arms firmly entwined around his chest, and a slow slide of the body, feet first into the liquid. It is in this respect not dissimilar, yes, analogous to cooking spaghetti. And then there's the magical moment with the introduction of the cadaver into the chemicals that results in a maelstrom of sizzling and frothing sound, furious spitting, the gradual transformation of the clear liquid into a rich maroon colour, and most delicious of all, the rising deadly gas.
All of this was the one time he enjoyed a release from his usually tension-inducing obsession with exactitude and order. This was the one moment he could really let go. Enjoyment is, in this context, far too weak a word. Stage 4 induced in him a state of excited frenzy, an intoxicating happiness, a passion he could not achieve in any other context.
This chaos can be tolerated, indeed enjoyed, because it has its place as a necessary part of a longer, yes, process that will result once again in personal enrichment and peace of mind, especially once the sludge has been disposed of. Everything will come to be cleansed.
There would once again be a quiet and self-satisfied harmony in Mr. Haigh's life.
The beauty of the scheme, from the business perspective, is the way the body is simply made to disappear.
And so even when it came to being interviewed by the police, as had happened in the past, and would inevitably take place once Mrs. Deacon was reported missing by the hotel, he could remain supremely calm in the knowledge that
no body equals no trial.
the sludge containing the remains would be scooped up in large metal buckets and carefully poured down the drain, together with large quantities of boiling water from an urn. How Mr. Haigh wished he could employ a young, trustworthy apprentice to help out.
It would be as if the business prospect had never lived. Acid is a truly wonderful, remarkable thing. Possibly the thing I love most in the world, well, at least on a par with a perfectly made cup of tea. The thing that makes this all possible, it is the cleansing agent to end all cleansing agents. So beautifully predictable in its application.
But it was his genius, he reminded himself, that had resulted in acid being applied in this truly novel way. An additional benefit was that though the police and others suspected he was in some way connected to these mysterious disappearances, they could not work out exactly what he had done. Nor would they. Mr. Haigh liked this enormously.
My lord, good heavens! Above! Hell's bells, is that really the time?
It was now 4:27 p.m. Mr. Haig's fond reminiscing and daydreaming meant that
Mrs. Darren Deacon's remains will now be bubbling over here to the drum. Not a normal boy.
a last letter to his parents from the condemned cell stated ominously,
We cannot change the inscrutable predictions of the Eternal. I, that is my spirit, shall remain earthbound for some time. My mission is not completed.
Mr. Haig's last request was for an extra cup of tea before his appointment with the chief executioner, Albert Pierpont. Whether the pot was first warmed is not known.